Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Got a new Cardfight Vanguard video for you guys today, and today we are covering a new episode. It's that time of the week. Today we're covering Season 2, Episode 5, and this was our Lyrical Mirror Match. Now, while I was not always the biggest fan of Lyrical, the more I've played with the decks, the more I found that I actually really enjoy them. I guess maybe it's the aesthetic that this isn't it for me, but their play styles have been a lot of fun, and I especially really like Chris Rain, so I was actually pretty hyped for this game. Actually, I was more excited for this one than some of the other ones that we've already had. So, if you guys enjoy this type of content, drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and let's jump into this episode review. So the episode kicks off with Mikoto playing some online Vanguard. She's actually losing to her online rival, which is the Comeback Man. Funny name. But it's funny because she's playing Gandiva, Comeback Man is playing Barrel Magnus, and she loses. And then they do a little bit of shit talking back and forth. And it turns out they play all the time. A couple lines the Comeback Man says end up mattering later in the episode, so I'm going to point those out right now. One thing he says is that comebacks make this game great, which I also agree. But then they also let it slip and say Yuna for the win. They try to, change it. It's like, oh, typo, I meant tuna. And then we get to see who the Comeback Man actually is. The Comeback Man is actually Yuna Saionji, which is Mikoto's opponent in the Destined fight. So it turns out they're already online rivals. That's why they end up having to face each other. They don't know that yet, but now we as an audience get to know. As for Yuna, it turns out that she is a Miton super fan. As a matter of fact, I might be putting it lightly. She has merch everywhere. She's constantly thinking about her, and she's full-blown obsessed. We jump over to the next day. We see Mikoto on top of the roof of the school looking at her phone. It obviously says, Fated One of Ever-Changing versus Destined One of Supremacy. And then Suo and Akina show up, and they start talking to Mikoto about her opponent, and she's like, I don't know who my opponent is, I don't know why we're even fighting, I don't know what the connection is, and apparently that's the same with Kuon. But it turns out all of the Fated Ones and Destined Ones that they're fighting are connected in some way. For Suo, him and Kuon used to be friends, he just doesn't remember that because of the accident. For Taizo and Kiyoma, they're business partners, they're friends, they've been together forever. For Masanori and Jinki, we know they were together, working on stuff together since the Will Just days, and maybe even before that. And obviously, we as an audience know Mikoto and Yuna are already rivals, so it makes a lot of sense. We then get to see a little bit of Yuna and her daily life. Her friends are asking her for help with schoolwork. It turns out she's actually kind of a prodigy. She's kind of a super genius, kind of like Kuon. They end up asking her what kind of celebrities she likes, and she goes off on a tangent about Miton in her own mind. And when she goes off. At one point, there's this picture that has Miton being painted as like a goddess or an angel, and it's pretty crazy. But it turns out she said all this in her mind. She doesn't want to tell her friends how obsessed she is with Miton because she doesn't want to seem like she's creepy. We then get some of Yuna's backstory. I guess she's always been pretty much perfect at academics, at sports, but she's also had a lot of pressure put on her by expectations from people, her family, and eventually it just gets to be too much. She found Vanguard on her own online, and she fell in love with it because that was the first thing she decided she wanted to get good at for herself. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Because this was the same kind of story we had for Mikoto back in Season 1. Mikoto had all the pressure of being an idol, being a student, and everything else, but then also she found Vanguard, and that was her escape. So they're actually very similar characters. What happened with Mikoto, or Miton, and why Yuna became obsessed with her is that one day Yuna was at a low point, and she was watching a video of Mikoto, and Mikoto was releasing a new song, and she was talking about, let's go face the future together. And, that's what this song's about. And I think the song's called Brand New. And something just clicked with Yuna, and that's where she became obsessed. And her love of Mikoto gave her the strength to keep on moving forward through all the BS. So it's pretty cute how they're attached. Not necessarily like enemies, but anyway. We go to the following night for the Destined fight. And we get a little internal monologue from Gabrielius. Gabrielius is looking at our Fated Ones, and he's trying to figure out which one of them is possessed. And he can't tell because either they don't know, but he theorizes that whichever one of them is being possessed by Sybil, she's not suppressing their consciousness. she's possessing them still because that's why she's in the plushie, but her main body is with one of them. But she's not making it obvious who it is. We get a little back and forth between Now and Akina, basically talking about Hikari. Now just like, have you tried to talk to her? And he says like she's been completely unapproachable since all this started. I want to include this picture here because I thought it was really interesting. So if we look on the left up top, we obviously have our faded ones. On the right, we have our destined ones. But in the middle, we have Kiyoma. He's the only one that's lost, and he was released from the brainwashing. So now he's in the middle, not on either side. So I thought that was a pretty interesting visual right before our fight starts. But now we're going to jump into the fight. Right before the fight, we do get one last cute little reaction for Yuna. She's like really like in shock that she's getting to fight Mikoto. And I thought it was adorable, especially with the swirly eye face. Mikoto kind of guesses that the reason they're fighting and the reason she's her destined rival is because she's a fan, but she doesn't want to come out and say it because she doesn't want to be wrong and she thinks it'd be embarrassing. But we jump into the fight. So we get to see our starters. Makoto's got her usual starter, Wonder, Lavender, Ursel, and Yuna's starter is Lucent, Sweet, Millies. Obviously basic grade zeros. So before we jump in, I always say this at the beginning of every fight. They do not have these characters draw for turn or energy charge. Just assume that they did it because they will use energy blast skills. They will still have decent sized hands. So just if I don't say it, assume that they did it at the beginning of every turn. It's a mandatory game mechanic. So they do it but they just don't make a big deal of it. But turn one, Mikoto actually starts. For majority of these fights, it's actually the destined ones who usually get to go first. But Mikoto goes first. Mikoto Rise, Lively Navy, Tifane. If I butcher the name, I'm sorry. But she just ends her turn. Now, Yuna plays a much more aggressive game, which I think is actually pretty cool, especially since she has to go second. Yuna rides Coolest Glance, Valea? I hope I said that right. She calls Beware of Overeating Eileen. Broken ass card. I love that card. And a new card named Jonette. I'm assuming this is either going to be a Persona booster or it's going to be the one that says, if you're on a certain grade 3, 5k shield, 5k power. She doesn't actually do anything with this card, minus what she does now. But Yuna attacks with Jonette. Mikoto guards. Yuna attacks with her Vanguard. Mikoto doesn't guard. Yuna, of course, doesn't get a trigger. Mikoto takes 1 damage. Yuna then attacks with the Eileen. Mikoto guards this one. Turn ends. Damage is 1-0. Obviously, Yuna's in the lead. Turn 3, Mikoto rides Confident Aqua Musette and uses Tifane's skill. So Tifane's skill is when this unit is rolled upon by Confident Aqua Musette, reveal the top card of your deck. Call it to rear guard. If it's a grade 2 or less normal unit, put it into your hand if it's not. I am not the biggest fan of this ride line, mostly because I don't like randomness. But you're going to see this whole fight, Mikoto is channeling that Yu-Gi-Moto energy. But Mikoto ends up calling off the top. She ends up calling a new card named Rochelle. It's probably got a longer name than that, but that's all they gave us. Mikoto attacks with Musette. Yuna doesn't guard. Musette's her Vanguard, by the way. Mikoto doesn't get a trigger. Yuna takes 1 damage. Mikoto then attacks with her Rochelle. This one Yuna guards. Turn ends. Damage is 1-1. The game is tied. Mikoto points out that this fight feels more right than usual. It's because they've played each other on multiple occasions. We know this, but they don't know this yet. But they're starting to get into the fight. Turn 4, Yuna rides Mature Lures Latika. She uses Valia's skill. I always try to reverse engineer the skills, so that way you guys can get a sneak peek at what these skills are going to do once we get them announced on Tuesday or later, depending on some releases. But I think I did a really good job nailing most of these skills. But Valia's skill auto, when this unit is ridden on by Latika, draw 1 card, put 1 card from your hand into the soul, and Latika gets 5,000 power. You guys see her stacking the soul really, really fast. It becomes important for her grade 3 turn. Unit moves both of her grade 1s back. She then calls Hopping Stellar Melty and uses her on-place skill. When this unit is placed on rear guard during your main phase, Counterblast 1, choose up to 1 card with grade equal to or less than your Vanguard from your hand, call it to rear guard, and then if you call the rear guard, you draw a card. She calls another new card named Albelina. This is another one, probably has a longer name, but we'll see that when we see it. This card's good. But she goes right into her battle phase. She attacks with Albelina. Makoto guards. She attacks with her Vanguard. Makoto doesn't guard. Yuna doesn't get a trigger. Makoto takes a damage. And then she attacks with the Melty. Makoto doesn't guard this one either. Makoto takes an additional damage. So by the turn end, the damage is 3-1 with Yuna in the lead. The girls talk about how much fun they're having, and Yuna tells Makoto to attack her relentlessly. You know, Makoto's like, okay, now I'm really gonna come at you. This is where they start to realize who each other are, because after Yuna tells Makoto to attack her relentlessly, Makoto's like, comebacks will make this game great. And that obviously clicks with Makoto. She's like, where have I heard that before? And then Yuna, throughout this fight, has a habit of referring to herself in the third person. And she's like, did Yuna say something weird? And then she's like, Yuna. And then it all clicks. She remembers the comeback man saying, comebacks make this game great. And she remembers her saying Yuna for the win. And then she stops. And she's just like, are you the comeback man? And she's like, because I'm Bunny Berry, which is her online handle. And they realize who each other are. And they're like, okay, that explains why we're destined to points, because we were already rivals. And of course, Yuna freaks out a little bit because she realizes that she's been playing Miton this entire time. But back to the game. Mikoto rides Faded One of Ever Changing, Chris Rain, and she uses Muset's skill. Auto, when this unit is rode upon by a grade 3 Chris Rain in its card name, reveal the top card of your deck, call it to rearguard if it's a grade 3 or less, and put it to your hand if it is not. A grade 3 or less unit, sorry. And put it into your hand if it is not. With this skill, she ends up calling Vivid Flush Wizme, and then from hand, she calls Innocent Orange Inez. And then she uses Inez's skill. When this unit is placed on rearguard, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Chris Rain in its card name, Counter Blast 1, Energy Blast 3, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to one unit card from among them with a different name from the unit cards on your Vanguard or rearguard, call it rearguard, shuffle your deck. I love this card. Inez is probably my favorite card in the Chris Rain deck. But off her skill, she calls Scaly Smiley Albina. And then she activates Chris Rain's skill. She wanted to set up her board first because of the way Chris Rain's skill works. So remember, she still has the grade 1 from last turn. She called Inez. She obviously has Chris Rain. She has Wizme, and she called Albina off of Inez's skill. So now she has 5 different names. So she activates Chris Rain's skill. Act Vanguard once per turn. You Counter Blast 1. Perform one of the following. If you have 4 or more units with different card names, you perform 2 of the following. And if you have 5, you perform all instead of just the 1. You draw 1 card, and you charge 3. You choose one of your units. It gets 15,000 power. And this unit gets +1 critical. So she draws a card and he charges 3. She gives Inez 15,000 power, which I thought was weird. Normally she gives all the power to her Vanguard since her Vanguard has the crit. You'll see why in a second. But then of course she gives the crit to her Vanguard. So she also does something else that's weird here. She attacks with all of her rear guards first. So she attacks with Wizme. Yuna doesn't guard, Yuna takes a damage. She attacks with Inez. Again, Yuna doesn't guard, takes a damage. She attacks with Chris Rain, and this is where we got to start to see some new stuff. So Rochelle, the grade 1 that she called on her second turn, what it does is, auto, when Chris Rain attacks, put this unit into your soul, draw a card, and stand a rear guard that was chosen by Chris Rain's skill. So the 15,000 power Chris Rain gives, she can give it to herself or she can give it to a rear guard. In this case, she gave it to Inez. She swung with all her rear guards because Rochelle was behind the Wizme. So she swung with the Wizme column, swung with the Inez column, and since Inez is bigger now, with the Chris Rain skill plus her own power boost, she restood it. This card is bonkers. As far as I could tell, there was no counterblast or soul cost. I counted the number of cards in her soul, it's still the same. She's got her 0, 1, and 2. Her counterblast, she only counterblasted 1 for Inez skill, 1 for Chris Rain's skill, so I'm assuming this is going to be an energy blast cost, and with a skill that strong, it's at least going to be an energy blast 3. Because at this point, she's supposed to be at 9 energy anyway. So that's my guess. But this skill is nuts. You move to soul when Chris Rain attacks, draw a card, restand a rear guard. This is also going to make Loving Pink Francette way better. So Francette, she's not featured in this episode, though I wish she was. When she's chosen by Chris Rain's skill, she gives 10,000 power back to Chris Rain. So you get to pump up both. And she has a skill to give herself power and bounce back a unit. So if you combine this with this grade 1, you now get to restand a decent sized grade 2 while still powering up Chris Rain for Chris Rain's critical. It's kind of bonkers the way they did it. But she, like I said, she swings with the Vanguard, uses the skill, restands Inez. Yuna guards with 2 cards from hand and both of her intercepts. So she just used 4 cards to guard. Mikoto gets a heal on the twin drive. She heals 1 damage and she gives the power to Inez. She then attacks with the Inez. and Yuna doesn't guard. So now the damage is 2-4 with Makoto in the lead. She had an explosive grade 3 turn. Yuna starts talking about how great Makoto is, how perfect Chris Rain is, and that it's the perfect card for Makoto because she's perfect. And Makoto tries to tell her that she's not perfect, that she makes mistakes, she gets overly emotional, and this triggers Yuna. Yuna starts spazzing about how no matter what you're saying, Makoto's perfect. And her wish was said at the beginning, she wants to be Miton. She thinks Miton's perfect, this is the person she wants to be. Granted, I think it's more if she wants to be like her, but because of Sybil's influence, her wish is getting twisted. So now she wants to be her. And in this moment, right before she rides grade 3, we see how twisted it actually gets. Because she's like, no, I'm not going to be this. I'm going to be the Miton I've envisioned. The person I think is perfect. The person I think is supremacy. Which, why she's the destined one in supremacy. But going into her turn, she rides the destined one supremacy. I'm going to butcher this name. Lucia Fail. Okay. Anyway, she uses her grade 2 skill, Lutica. When this unit is rode upon by Lucia Fail, draw 1 card and soul charge 1. Again, a lot of soul charging. Unit then calls a new card named Amphi. Again, this is the only part of the name we got. This card's actually going to be really good, and you'll see why a little bit later. But she does use its on-play skill. When it's played on Rearguard, Counterblast 1, draw a card, and this unit gets 5,000 power. Unit then calls another copy of Albina, and she calls Blue-Haired Prodigy Resius. This card's already out. When it's played, you get to give a unit 10,000 power. She ends up giving 10,000 power to the Vanguard. She attacks with the Amphi, Makoto guards. She then attacks with the Albina, Makoto guards. Now this is another weird one. I was wondering why she attacked with both of her rear guards first. Amphi is a grade 3, as you guys saw from the picture. There's a reason she did this. But then she attacks with her Vanguard, and she activates its skill. So this is its normal skill. Auto, when this unit attacks, Counterblast 1. Again, I went through all the footage. I checked on her Counterblast over and over again, and that's when I realized that this has to be a Counterblast cost. You put 2 rear guards into the soul, and this unit gets 10,000 power plus 1 drive. Fire. I thought that was a really easy to use skill. The deck, it draws a bunch of cards. When you're playing other lyrical support, it's superior calls, it adds cards back to hand. It's going to be easy to maintain to be able to use this skill just about every turn. But she puts Amphi and the Reseus into soul, and she triggers Amphi's skill. So Amphi's skill, other than the on-call skill, has another skill. When this unit is put into the soul for the cost of your Vanguard skill, I'm assuming with the CFL in its card name, that unit gets 5,000 power till end of turn. So that's why she swung with her rear guards first. She swung with the grade 3, so that way she could then pump up the Vanguard even more. And then she used Albelia's skill. That's the grade 2 that she attacked with also. I'm assuming, again for this condition, when your rear guard is moved to the soul for the cost of your Vanguard skill, stay in this unit with power plus 5,000. Again, as far as I know, this doesn't have much of a cost. I'm assuming it's going to be an energy cost because her Counterblast doesn't change. The only Counterblast she uses are Amphi when she plays it, and then her Vanguard skill. And then this manages to restand while her damage doesn't change. So, back to the Vanguard attack. Makoto doesn't guard. She's at 2 damage. Off the triple drive, Yuna gets a heal trigger. She gives the power to the Albelina, and she heals 1 damage. Makoto takes 1 damage here. We then get to see Lucia Fail's Divine Skill, and I really like this Divine Skill. So after this unit attacks, I'm assuming your opponent has to be at grade 3. I don't not think they would allow you to do this with your opponent at grade 2. This is too strong. If you have 6 or more cards in your soul, Counterblast 1, stand this unit with -2 drive checks. Mind you, it gave itself a drive check, so it still has 1 drive check. This unit gains 5,000 power for the rest of the fight, and plus 1 critical. They were specific on separating those 2 effects, so I don't think you get an extra critical for the rest of the fight, though I do think that would be fire for a Divine Skill, 5k and a crit for the rest of the fight. But just getting a restanded Vanguard attack and 5k for the rest of the fight, you're sitting at 18 for the rest of the fight on both players' turns. I think that's fucking amazing. But that's why I got so excited about this skill, and this is why I think this deck should go second. Because you want to be able to fire that Divine Skill as fast as possible, because that puts your defense through the roof. As someone who played Griffo Gila, the grade 11 for a while, having that extra 5k makes such a huge difference. But anyway, she now attacks with her restood Vanguard. Makoto decides not to guard. Remember, this skill has this Vanguard has a critical, but On the single drive check, she does get a draw trigger. She gives it to the Albina. She then attacks with the Albina, but this time Mikoto dumps a bunch of cards and manages to guard it. But at the end of this turn, the damage is 5-3, with Yuna now back in the lead. Mikoto starts talking about herself, starts talking about what keeps her going, and basically she said when she got to a low point, it was her fans and the love of her fans that kept her going. That when she released a new video, the comments saying how much they loved her, and all the support that she's gotten is what allows her to keep going even when she gets low, even when she messes up. And her motivation really shines here because she basically says that she's not going to allow Yuna to be another version of her, regardless of what she wants. She wants Yuna to be, the best version of herself. And you see that this clicks with Yuna. But then we go into turn 7, which is the final turn, which is funny because a lot of these games have gone into turn 8. This is probably the shortest game that we've gotten in a while. No Persona Rod, which is crazy, but it's because Chris Rain can do crazy shit. And again, Mikoto was channeling her inner Yugimoto. She calls Cheerful Sunshine Valix, which is a critical trigger. She calls it to the back row. She's just basically dumping her hand. And she did it to get the extra name, because now she has 5 names again. She uses Chris Rain's skill. She draws 1 card, and she charges 3. She gives 15k power to the Chris Rain, because she's going for the Divine Skill this turn. And she gives, obviously, the critical. She then calls the card she drew, which was another Albina. And now her field's full. She attacks with a Nez. Yuna doesn't guard, takes 1 damage. She attacks with her Wizme. Yuna doesn't guard, Yuna takes 1 damage. She then attacks with Chris Rain. Yuna uses a perfect guard. Mikoto gets a draw trigger on her twin drive, gives the power to Chris Rain, and then uses the Divine Skill. Just a quick reminder, Auto Vanguard, at the end of the battle, this unit attacked a grade 3 or greater unit, return all rear guards to the hand, choose 1 unit card from your hand, call it to rear guard until the end of turn, increase or decrease that unit's power and critical to match this unit's. So she bounces all her rear guards to hand, and then she calls out a Nez. Now, Nez's skill is on place, and it doesn't matter if it's main phase or battle phase, so she then uses a Nez's skill. With a Nez's skill, she Counter Blasts 1, Energy Blast 3, checks top 5, calls 1. I don't like this call, but again, she's channeling her inner Yugimoto. She was literally going Monster Cardo, Monster Cardo, Monster Cardo. Because she then calls Munching Girl Sia off the top. She could have called a grade 2 or grade 3 or even that grade 1 to the front row on the other side to guarantee 5 attacks, but no, she puts it behind a Nez. So what Sia does is when this unit is placed on rear guard, Soul Blast 1, look at the top card of your deck, call it to an open rear guard circle, or put it into your hand. If you put it into your hand, you have to discard a card. So she's banking on this grade 1 getting her something useful. So she Soul Blast 1, checks the top card, and it's another Inez. So she calls another Inez to the other side. And she still has the energy. She still has another Counter Blast, so she uses this new Inez's skill. And off the top 5 gets another Albina. Albina is her if you have a Chris Rain, plus 5k power, plus 5k shield. So she just got another 13k booster. And the crazy thing is, because she did this double Inez play by accident, she now has 4 different names on her board, so Inez's power boosts are live. Inez has a continuous skill where when she attacks a grade 3 or greater, well, an auto skill, when she attacks a grade 3 or greater, if you have 4 more units with different card names, this unit gets 10,000 power till the end of battle. So she has one Inez that's huge with the power boost from Chris Rain, but now she has 4 different names, so it's going to gain an additional 10,000 power. So she swings with that one first. That one has the critical. That's the one Yuna guards because obviously she doesn't want to have to hit 2 heals. And then the second Inez swings with like 33, and Yuna ends up having to take it, banking on getting 1 heal. She doesn't. The game ends there, and Mikoto wins 5-6. Obviously now Yuna's free of her influence, and Mikoto's just like, that was fun, and wants to be friends with her. Yuna spazzes out, gives her a hug, is super happy about it. We'll get a quick look up into the stands, and we actually get to see a little bit of Otakari, where she's smiling and she's still a Miton fan, and she's still talking about how great Miton is. And then Kuon chimes in, he's like, you're still as innocent as ever. And this clicks with Hikari, he's like, have we met before? And he looks over to the faded ones, he's like, I've met all of you before. And that's like a little hint into, future storyline stuff, I'm assuming. And then after that, we jump to a completely different topic altogether, and we see Gui talking to Masanori. And Gui is talking about the ruins that we saw Jinky visiting in the last episode, and he says that 10 years ago, there was a giant energy surge there. So Masanori assumes that 10 years ago, in that spot, planet Krei came into contact with Earth. Now, I don't know what event this was. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't think this is 10 years after Will Dress or Overdress, and I don't think that the Divine series is connected to the old Vanguard series, but I could be wrong. I guess we'll have to see what happens. But I'm assuming this is when Sybil actually came to Earth, and Sybil's been here since. Well, we won't know until they show us later on. But that's the end of the episode, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see on Tuesday how well I nailed all these skills. If you guys want to see me mess around with these cards live, they should be released on Tuesday. And if they go onto Cardfight area, I will be building this deck. I think I love a defensive deck, and being able to give myself 5k power for the rest of the game. I need to see if it's both players' turns. If it's both players' turns, I'm gassed. If it's just on your turn, I mean, it's still good, just not as good as I would have liked. And we also got our other Destined one, Destined one of Expedience in Polito. That one got announced. That one has a really interesting set of skills. I haven't messed around with that yet. I'm gonna do that on stream as well. So we're gonna be messing around with 2 Destined ones this week. I guess we got Impolito early for some reason. I'm not exactly sure. I think maybe the anime is going on break next week, but we'll see what happens. So if you guys want to see all that, be here Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I would love to hear your guys' input. Again, drop a like on the video, subscribe. If you guys want to check me out on social media, those links are down below. That is it from me. I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.